So, hello everybody, and these are the fireside tales from the Temple of Avalon. My name is B. Halligan and I'm a Priestess of Avalon and a Priestess of Cerridwen, and at this moment of time I'm holding space in the temple here in Avalon. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about what I'm passionate about, and that is the story of Cerridwen. Now, I am a teacher that teaches a course about the Cerridwen, the goddess Cerridwen, and I have done so for the last 6 years. And I actually initiated the training to become a Priestess of Avalon because I felt it was so incredibly important that she is brought back into the world. I've worked with Cerridwen since 2003, and I initiated as her priestess in 2012. At the Lake Bala, where she and her realm lives. And for me, she's very present there. I love being at the lake, I love being at the shoreline, and as I look out, the mists there are fantastic. You literally can't see the lake when you're standing there as the mists descend. And it is just a wonderful place, a peaceful place. It can get very wild. She is a fiery goddess, and she is a fierce goddess, and she is a fierce mother goddess. And part of the reason why I'm speaking today about her is that she has with her the 9 Morwynion. Now, here in Avalon, where I'm sitting, we have the 9 Morgans. And the 9 Morgans are the shape-shifting sisters, priestesses that we hear about in King Arthur's tale, where they are bringing Morgana, the main priestess, and one of her sisters are bringing back the body of Arthur into Avalon. But for me, the Morwynion are different, and they are mentioned in a wonderful poem, the Spores of Annwn, and they are spoken of in highly respected terms, the 9 maidens whose breath warms the cauldron of rebirth. And the cauldron is one of the hallows that King Arthur and Taliesin goes to find in Annwn, in the other world, not the underworld, please, the other world. So the cauldron is a womb, is a chalice, is whatever you want it to be. The cauldron is a conscious, sentient being, like the barge that we have here in Avalon. The barge that takes King Arthur into the other world is called Preiddeu, and she is a goddess in her own right. All the beings that we find in the story of Cerridwen all have sentience, and they all know what they're doing. And that includes the water that is brought in to brew the brew. Those are the plants that are brought in to give their essence into the brew so that wisdom and knowledge can be coming forth from them. And that is the fire, the wood under the cauldron, the fire that burns it. All of these have sentience. And all of these are creating what is one of the greatest spells that has ever been spoken, as far as I'm concerned. And the interesting thing for me that I have realized over the last few months, and this is something that is coming through from Annwn for me, I believe that we do channel knowledge and wisdom, and when the time is right, we will be given yet another piece of the puzzle by Goddess, so that we may tell her story right. So for some of you, you may not know Iolo Morganwg or Llewellyn Sean. For some of you, there is an idea that these people make stuff up. You know, Iolo Morganwg especially has a really bad reputation amongst some scholars, but the fact of the matter is that I know that knowledge can come directly from Goddess, that knowledge can come directly through you if you have a deep connection with her. That is knowledge about her story, that is knowledge about the relevance of her story. I was going to get that out. And it is knowledge about how we can apply parts of the story in our own lives. So one of the parts of the story is playing around this time, is the rage that she feels when she feels betrayed by Gwion, when he has received the wisdom and the knowledge that she wanted for her own son. And for me, there is a reason why that is. And I've wondered about this for years. You know, I've read everything that you might want to read. And to me, quite frankly, I love reading books about Cerridwen. Some of them set my teeth on edge, I will say that. Some of the ways that people talk about her that I don't recognize her in. So I know that they don't actually have a connection with her. But, you know, we all get what we deserve. We all get that piece of wisdom that we need from her. And she doesn't judge or value judge what she gifts us, because it is what we need to move on in our spiritual development. So the Morwynion, for me, were always an elemental force. They were the beings that couldn't really be nailed down. They weren't the same as the Morgans here in Avalon. They are not blackbirds and crows and things like that for me. And I always only ever talk about what they are for me. And the reason I speak to you about that is because maybe you get another further hint about who they are. But for me, they were the first people or the first beings that came to pass in Annwfn. I would say that they are the creatrixes, or they have been sent by the being that created, if it was a being, by the energy that created our world and the other world. I also believe that at one point, a bit like Tolkien in his books, believed that our worlds were connected, and that we could walk in Annwfn as much as they could walk in our world. It was only when we became so obsessed with greed and so obsessed with violence that they left us, that they closed the curtains on us, that they allowed the mist to descend between us and them. They didn't want anything to do with us. We were not worthy of their company. Now, all of this you can dismiss, and I have no issue with that. I just want to tell you about how things are for me, and maybe they give you something that you have not had in your life or in your idea about who she is. So the Morwynion are the first beings in Annwfn, and they have been gifted with the cauldron to protect the cauldron. They have been charged by the universe, perhaps. The Celts believed in mirror images. There was a cauldron, a warm cauldron in the cosmos, the cosmic cauldron, and that brought forth our worlds. And so we have a reflection of that cosmic cauldron in the cauldron that the Morwynion brought with them and protected. And from that cauldron, all life began. And so for me, that is what their purpose is. They are there to protect that cauldron. They're there to activate that cauldron. They're there to ignite the warmth, the fire in that cauldron. So when you think about breath and fire, if fire doesn't have oxygen, it dies. When we don't have oxygen, we die. So breath is life. So their breath warms the cauldron. It's not a mention about a fire necessarily under that cauldron of creation. So for me, there is that cauldron of creation that brings forth all of the beings. And obviously, they are born in a sequence. There's, again, no value judgment for me, but somebody had to come first. Somebody had to be building the base. So I believe that we were brought in, and that humanity, the human beings, we are the youngest members of the tribe. And we are a little bit like willful children. We will not be told. I've got a grandson who's almost 2 years of age, and he will not be told anything. His first reaction is to scream, stamp his feet and run away. And I sometimes see the way that we as people develop in a very similar vein. In the story of Cerridwen, if you don't know, at one point, 3 drops of Annwfn after a year and a day are dispensed from the cauldron, and they fly on the thumb of Gwyonbach, who has been stirring the cauldron faithfully for all that time. So he's put in his energy. He has been diligent and careful, and he has created that with Morda and Cerridwen. There's a sacred triangle of creation. if you count the cauldron and everything that is in it, again, you know, you have sacred triangles everywhere in the story, but I won't go into deep. So Gwion is received the drops, and he realizes that Cerridwen is about to come back and will kill him if she finds that he has taken what she rightfully believes is her son. And so he runs, and we follow them. What we don't do is find out what happens to the cauldron. And in my imagination, in my creation, in my connection with the goddess, where she shows me some pictures and images of the story, I see the cauldron crack, and I see the poisoned brew spill into the earth, poisoning the earth, and into the fire and creating ashes. And I see the liquid flowing into the river where the horses drink it and die. Now, we are still talking about why is that an important part of the story, but I won't digress right now. What I love about training people as a priestess of Cerridwen is that each and every one of them has an opinion. I mean, we had a really great discussion yesterday, and my students were very fierce and very clear on how they felt the story is for them. And so this cauldron is now broken, this sacred cauldron, and the fire is out. What I see happens next is that the Morwynion arrive, and they see the broken cauldron, and like Arthur is carried away to recover on the isle. I'm not saying that the cauldron necessarily goes to Avalon, but it could have done. But I believe that the Morwynion take the cauldron and they take it into a place that we will never find, in the other world, in Annwfn. And they place it in the earth. It's interesting that they place it in the earth. Think about it, please. We also place our beloved dead into the earth, and we expect them in the Christian mythology that they will arise at a certain time. The same goes for the story of King Arthur. He too is resting and will arise when the time is needed. So for me, the cauldron, the sentient being, is taken away by the Morwynion, and they are repairing it. They're placing it into the earth, and the earth heals the cauldron. And the Morwynion are defending the cauldron. We know very clearly that the Morwynion stand around the cauldron as the maidens who kindle it, and they will not, as it says in the poem, boil the food of a coward. So we can approach, if we have felt and we are connected and we are found worthy, we may be given access to the cauldron, so that we may place ourselves into that space and be challenged by the Morwynion on all of our shadows. And we talk about the negative emotions and things like that have created the story that we're talking about. And there is shame and fear and not feeling worthy and feeling unheard. There's all of that. We look at these emotions in the training very carefully, because as priestesses, we have to move above those, or we not necessarily move above. We need to see them. We need to integrate them. We need to make a peace with some of the things that have happened in our lives. So the training is very much a self-healing and then a healing of others. But I digress, which I do frequently. I do apologize. So the Morwynion are stepping forward, and they challenge you. Each and every one of them has something, knows something about you, feels something about you, and she shows you a mirror. And she says, look into that mirror, and it's a black mirror, a dark mirror, a mirror of obsidian or onyx, a crystal mirror that shows you exactly who you are, with all the distortions that we don't see when we look into a normal mirror. It shows you all your crap, excuse the language. And only when you have dealt with all of that will they allow you to come towards that cauldron. The cauldron of death and rebirth, the cauldron of transformation, the cauldron of eternal life. There are many, many, many names for that cauldron. And you are allowed to look into that mirrored brew and see who you could really be when you allow yourself to be healed. Now, I also believe that it is very few people who get to that point in life. And the Morwynion will not allow the cauldron to come back into this world, to be seen by anyone who's not worthy, until all of humanity has learned how to live in peace with all existences. Our Druid prayer, our Druid oath, asks for the wonderful attributes like justice and knowledge and love. Grant, O Goddess, or Spirit, or whatever you like to call to, us the understanding, the knowledge, justice, truth. And unless we are able to stand in front of that cauldron and really feel that we have come to that point of equilibrium, of balance, of being able to live in harmony with all existences as a human being, we are not going to get any access to that cauldron. And certainly unless we are all making a big shift and we become better people. And this is a peaceful, harmonious world that we live in. Will the Morwynion not allow the cauldron to be seen by mortals again? They are very fierce creatures. They could be akin to the Furies. They protect, they guide, and they guard. And only when we let go of all that is not to the best for everyone, only when we allow ourselves to be pure love, will we be allowed to see the cauldron where it stands now. I would love to see this world to become a better place. Right now, what we are going through, that is the deal we've made. We have created hubris, we have created chaos, and the chaos is reflected back at us. If you think COVID was just an accident, if you think that COVID was just something that we can fight, just a virus, I think you might be very naive. And you can disagree with me. I'm happy for anyone to show me that they have a better way of thinking about this. But I know one thing for sure. When I look around, the failures and the failings of the people all around us, including myself, are what causes the pain and the suffering in this world. And the Morwynion are the ones that hold us accountable. They will come to us in our sleep. And at night, when our soul sort of uncouples from our body and returns to the web of souls in the universal womb, the Morwynions are the ones that tell us, that show us where exactly we went wrong that day. Each day I look back and I think to myself, what could you have done better? What have you learned from this? At the moment I'm very angry. It's part of why I made this video about the death of the women and the child in the last week. The way that the woman and the child are not really acknowledged, but the young woman that died at the hand of a police officer is being honored by women standing up and men standing up and saying, This has to stop. This has to stop. Everybody is allowed to feel safe in this world. It's not enough. We don't do enough to hold everyone safe. And it is the fury of the Morwynion that I feel in myself right now at the destruction that we create. We are all responsible for each other. It is important that we stand against the violence and the suffering that the women and the children especially are facing in 2021. As the economy will go down, and it will, they are the ones that we need to take care of. We need to find a way to once again protect the women and the children that need our help. We need to step away from what about me and into what about them. And we have to step into trust and surrender that Goddess will show us how and where we can help. And when it is even just placing a phone call when you see someone being violent against a woman or a young woman or a child, even if it is an anonymous phone call, it is something. It is something. Cerridwen is the fierce mother. She's the one that stands up for her son. She stands up against the way that he's being treated by people. She may not get it entirely right, but she does something. She takes action. She is an activist. She is an advocate for her own child. Some mothers can't do that. Some mothers have to live in fear of not having enough to eat, in fear of not having shelter, in fear of the person they live with, and yet they cannot find a way out. Put pressure on your MPs. Find out where shelters are being closed. I call upon you now to be one of the fierce mothers, one of the fierce women that protects the cauldron of transformation, protects your community and protects the children in your community. From the Glastonbury Goddess Temple, my name is Preiddeu. I am a priestess and an activist and an advocate for those who cannot speak for themselves. And I ask you to be the same. Blessed be.